Goodness, your fans are coming.
Testing 1, 2, 3, testing.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Township of Georgian Bay for our Planning Council meeting of Tuesday, July 14th, 2026. And I'd like to call this meeting to order at 9 a.m. In the spirit of reconciliation, we wish to acknowledge the enduring relationship between Indigenous peoples and the territories they have traditionally occupied. We recognize and deeply appreciate the historic connection they have to this place, the land, the water, the sky, and all that live on, in, and above it. We are grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the generations of Indigenous people who have taken care of this place and who continue to care for it. And we want to show our respect. Hundreds of years after the first treaties were signed, they remain relevant today. May they guide our decisions and our actions. We commit to learn, to educate, to honor sacred places, and to take action towards real truth, and reconciliation. Miigwech. In addition, we want to acknowledge the commitment of the residents of Georgian Bay Township. We recognize that this municipality operates because of the financial support and volunteerism of a diverse community, including seasonal and full-time residents, volunteers, and businesses who sustain our services, infrastructure, staff, and local democracy. We all share a common interest in having a transparent, fiscally responsible, and well-governed municipality. Council, the corporation, including its municipal staff, commit to serving with accountability, fiscal responsibility, environmental stewardship, to create a service-oriented culture that focuses on helping and acting in the best interests of the community. Council, any declarations of pecuniary interest or conflict of interest? Councillor Graziano.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, I have a conflict to declare on. Should I the agenda item? Bear with me for one moment. Just looking for it here. On 9C, thank you.
Any other declarations, Council? Councillor Jarvis.
Also declaring on 9C.
Thank you. Councillor Predko.
I'll declare on 9C as well, please.
You. Councillor Hazelton. Councillor Bocek. Okay, you're
A conflict of interest in 9C.
Councillor Cooper. Okay, so we have a situation where I as well, so all seven of us are declaring a conflict with regards to item 9C, which is the temporary use zoning bylaw amendment extension application Z2605 or rock crushing by OBD Development, Inc. You got that? I trust everyone will file their forms with the clerk in due course. Okay. Councillor Hazelton.
I think we want to.
Mute your microphone.
I think we want to flush out the fullness of the reasons for conflict, indicating that each and every one of us have been the recipient of a lawsuit against us individually and the township. And as a result of that and the confusion around clarity of our possible forward steps, that it makes sense for us to declare a conflict of interest. That would be for me personally, and I don't know what my fellow councillors feel, but that is the criteria that I think we need to document and conflict of interest reasons.
I think it's perfectly appropriate for us to note that all seven of us individually, as well as the township, are subject to a lawsuit laid by OBD Developments, and therefore I believe that we need a judicial review before we make any further decisions or comments. All right. With that, Madam Clerk, do we have anyone in open forum? We do not. Then let's go to our Municipal Act public meeting. And Madam Clerk, I don't know if this is as your deputy clerk role or something, I believe the first file is yours. The Shore Road Allowance. Oh, you want a speech? Yes, of course. Thank you for the reminder. This morning, there's a public meeting scheduled, excuse me, for one Shore Road closing application. I will briefly summarize the procedure to be utilized for the meeting. First, the clerk will advise council as to when, how, and to whom notice the public meeting was circulated for the proposed road closing being considered. Next, staff will advise of the purpose and effect of the bylaws and provide for any other information that is relevant to the applications, and staff will summarize any correspondence on file. From there, the public will have an opportunity to speak and provide comments to the bylaw being considered. Please be respectful of time and be concise with your comments. All commentators are requested to state their name and address. Council will then have an opportunity to provide comments for clarification. I now declare this meeting to be a public meeting pursuant to the Municipal Act of 2001 C25 as amended to deal with the following proposed, following proposed road closing bylaw, namely R 26-01 for 68 Bear Lake Road. To our clerk.
Notice of the public meeting was digitally published in a virtual newspaper and was sent to the abutting neighbors in close proximity to the property at least 30 days prior to today's meeting.
And then I get to say again, to our clerk.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. This report is before Council to consider the closure and conveyance of a portion of the Shorewood Allowance located in front of 68 Bear Lake Road. The application proposes to close and convey Part 1 on Plan 35R 28082 with 29.853 meters of shoreline frontage. The purchase price has been calculated at $7,224.42 plus HST in accordance with the Township's fees and charges bylaw. The existing cottage is located entirely on the Shorewood Allowance, and the purpose of the application is to bring those lands into private ownership and to resolve the existing encroachment. The applicant has also indicated plans to install a dock in the future, which will also be located on the Shorewood Allowance. The application was circulated to external agencies and neighboring properties, and no comments or objections were received. Staff have reviewed the application against the Township Shorewood Allowance policy and are satisfied that all requirements have been met. There is no financial impact to the Township, and all costs are borne by the applicant, and the transaction will result in revenue. This is an overview of the subject lands. The property is located on Stewart Lake and is zoned shoreline residential type 1. Site sketch illustrates the location and configuration of the subject lands, including the existing dwelling, docks, sheds, and the portion of the Shorewood Allowance proposed to be conveyed. We have a copy of the survey, which shows Part 1, which represents the portion of the Shorewood Allowance proposed to be closed and conveyed. And based on the information presented, staff recommend that Council approve the closure and conveyance of the subject lands and adopt the associated closing and deeming bylaws. I'm happy to answer any questions Council may have.
Thank you very much. Do we have any members of the public that wish to speak to this? No. Okay. I don't see hands flying up in the audience, so therefore I'm going to turn it over to Council. Sorry. Councillor Jarvis, do you have any comments or questions?
I do have a question for the clerk if you will allow, Mayor. I'm just curious, it says it's Part 1. Is there a Part 2? Why would it be the only part of this land that wasn't known as Part 1 if there's no other parts to it?
I think through your worship, the surveyors decide the parts, and I'm assuming that the other section of the land is identified as Part 2, but I mean, if there's no other parts, they just start with the first number on the reference plan.
Okay,
through the chair, generally the way it works is they subdivide, they're only surveying that portion of the property and it's getting its own 35R registered plan number. So that is the part they're purchasing. So it's Part 1. The other part will have another number on another plan.
So I'm just getting at is there's no other Shore Road Allowance section that needs to be purchased. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, moved by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Graziano. Be it resolved, the council passed a closing bylaw 2026-051 to stop up, close, and convey part of the original Shore Road Allowance in front of Lot 1, Concession 8, being Part 1, Plan 35R-28082, formerly Freeman, now in the Township of Georgian Bay, the District Municipality of Muskoka, for 68 Bear Lake Road for the purchase price of $7,224.42 plus HST, subject to all applicable costs and fees being paid in full. And that council passed a deeming bylaw 2026-052, part of Plan M136, formerly Township of Freeman, now in the Township of Georgian Bay, the District Municipality of Muskoka, not to be a registered plan of subdivision for the purposes of the Planning Act RSO 1990 CP 13 S53, and that the council authorize the mayor and clerk to execute any documents necessary to complete the conveyance. Council, all those in favor? And that is passed. Thank you very much. And now you want another speech. This time I'm ready. Okay, that is the end of our Municipal Act public meetings. And now we have the Planning Act public meetings portion of our council meeting this morning. And this morning, there's a public meeting scheduled for one proposed zoning bylaw amendment. I will briefly summarize the procedure to be utilized for the meeting. First, the clerk will advise council as to when, how, and to whom the notice of the public meeting was circulated for the proposed amendments being considered. The clerk will also advise of the appeal procedures. Next, staff will advise of the purpose and effect of the bylaws and provide any other information that is relevant to the applications, and the clerk will summarize any correspondence on file. From there, the public will have an opportunity to provide comments on the amendments being considered. Please be respectful of time and be concise with your comments. All commentators are requested to state their name and address and sign in on the sheet provided. After the public discussion, the public meeting will be closed. Council will then have an opportunity to provide comments for clarification. I now declare this meeting to be a public meeting pursuant to 34 of the Part 34, I presume, of Planning Act to deal with the following proposed amendments. Zoning bylaw amendment file Z26-14 for 117 Port Severn Road North to our clerk.
Notice of the public meeting was sent by first-class mail to the respective owners and assessed persons within 120 to 800 meters of the property subject to the proposed applications and to the persons and agencies likely to have an interest in the application. These notices were sent at least 30 days prior to this morning's meeting. Included in each notice was an explanation of the purpose and effect of the proposed application and a key map showing the location of the properties or a description of the lands to be affected by the proposed amendments. Other relevant information may have also been provided. These circulations were all provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and the Township of Georgian Bay official plan. Members of the public are advised at this point that unless they make an oral or written submission to council before council makes a decision on these applications, that any subsequent appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal may be dismissed by the tribunal. Anyone who wishes to be notified of council's decision respecting the proposed zoning bylaw amendments must submit a written request to the planning department.
Yeah, to our clerk.
Correspondence relating to zoning bylaw amendment file Z26-14 was received as follows. One letter was received from Kaylee Nicholson, Chief Building Official, stating she has no objections to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment or removal of holding provision H-16. Building permits will be required prior to the demolition and destruction, and compliance with all applicable requirements will be reviewed through the permit process. One letter was received from the District of Muskoka stating staff would recommend that a decision on both the zoning bylaw amendment and lifting of the hold provision applications be deferred until such time that outstanding peer review and hydraulic modeling exercise has been completed and any required revisions proposed have been made. One letter from the Severn Sound Environmental Association was received stating they received the application and determined that the proposed redevelopment does not pose a significant drinking water threat or trigger Clean Water Act or Source Protection Plan requirements. One letter was received from Hutchinson Environmental Sciences, Ltd., providing a peer review of the application, and one letter was received from Park Canada Agency stating they have no issues with the application.
Thank you very much. And with all that, we're going to turn over to our municipal planner, Jeff Kratke, who's on the file, will provide an overview of the application, its processing to date, and the purpose and effect of the bylaw. Sir.
Thank you, Mayor Couture. With your permission, I will share my screen. Good morning, Mayor, Council, everyone in attendance here in the chambers, and everyone in attendance online. Today, we're here regarding application number Z2614 regarding 117 Port Severn Road North. The owner is a numbered company. The agent is MHBC Planning. And my name, of course, is Jeff Kratke, and I am a registered professional planner employed full-time by the Township of Georgian Bay. The subject lands are located in the southern part of the Township of Georgian Bay in the Port Severn Urban Center. on Port Severn Road North, approximately equidistant between Lone Pine Road and the lock at the Port Severn, at the Trent Severn Waterway. The purpose and effect of the application is to amend the site-specific exceptions for the residential multiple type 2 exception 5 hold 16 zone on the subject lands to allow for the detailed design of the proposed development provided through concurrent application S2601 and to remove the hold 16. The effect of the application is the demolition of an existing tourist commercial cottage establishment and the construction of 6 fourplex dwellings for 24 units and 24 apartment dwellings in 2 apartment buildings. The site-specific exception zone has a lot of important exceptions to the zoning bylaw. And so for the additional information table, I provided a summary both of those being amended through this application, as well as the almost 10, I believe it is, that are not being amended at all. What I think is important to understand is that the developer has been very cooperative with staff in many respects. And council will, of course, recall that this development was very, very different when it first came to you in 2024 and has changed over time. One of the key aspects of this zoning bylaw amendment was the desire of the applicant to properly plan everything in a very detailed fashion, and staff's request and their honoring of staff's request to push the development back towards Port Severn Road rather than get any closer to the type 1 fish habitat in Little Lake. There are some new things in this, but rather than going into the details, I'm going to allow council through its questions to ask any questions about those details. This is an example from the site plan application of the request. And what council can see in this is that, again, the development has pushed right back to Port Severn Road, where again, the parking structures underneath the apartment buildings are very close to the lot line on Port Severn Road. The MLP designates the lands as part of the Port Severn Urban Center. What's important to know, though, is that there are many natural constraints on these lands. One is a type 1 fish habitat immediately appurtenant to the lands in Little Lake. There are also the potential for important bat species, and there is the nearby turtle nesting or wintering area. The natural hazards have been planned for, and none of the amendments to the zoning bylaw that are being considered by council today are affected by any of the natural hazards, whether that's the flood elevation on the Trent Severn Waterway or the extreme fire hazard risk across the street. I'm confident, despite our GeoHub mapping, that these lands are entirely designated residential, and the adjacent lands are a mixture of residential, commercial, and mixed use. These lands are part of what's known as the Port Severn Village Center in the Master Plan and Urban Design Guidelines for Port Severn. And the Port Severn Village Center is meant to be an area from this town hall all the way through to the other side of the Trent Severn Waterway, and from a shopping center site on the opposite side of the 400 as well. The zoning bylaw shows that the lands are in the RM205H16 zone, and that was a correction that was made by a recent housekeeping amendment to our zoning bylaw. So you may read in the documents and in some of the comments that this is part of a different site-specific exception zone. That is not the case. It is the same zone renumbered, and those documents were accurate before the Ontario Land Tribunal issued a decision. As you can see, the existing cottage development, tourist cottage resort development, is to be fully replaced by this proposed residential development. And the surrounding lands include a mixture of commercial and residential uses. Therefore, I am recommending to council, be it resolved that council for the Township of Georgian Bay accepts all the information regarding the zoning bylaw amendment application number Z2614 presented at the public meeting on July 14th, 2026, refers all said information and comments to township staff for further discussion with the agent and district staff and anyone who commented, and township staff shall not schedule the next meeting of council to evaluate the application until after all comments are addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we know if the applicant or their agents are wishing to make any comment on this presentation? I know that's not the applicant, so it must be the agent.
Thank you, Worship, and members of council and members of the public. My name is Jamie Robinson, and I'm a planner and partner with MHBC in Barrie, and we're the applicants. We're the planners on behalf of the owners. Just gonna share my screen here. And I won't repeat what Jeff said about the designations and that. I just like to hit on a few of the highlights with respect to the amendments that are being sought to help paint a bit of a picture for council and the public with respect to the requests that are being made. So there's a few photographs that I just wanted to show to illustrate some of the key elements of the site and really why we're here. I know we've been before council previously with respect to zoning and establishing the principle of use for the site. Because of the site plan and the detailed design that's gone on, it's precipitated a few different amendments. In addition to that, dealing with the waterfront area, we previously didn't deal with shoreline structures as part of the original zoning bylaw amendment, and that's the secondary purpose to this zoning amendment application that's today. This is a photograph of the shoreline area with respect to the property. Actually, maybe I'll just make it bigger here. So, slideshow. So there's a couple of key elements with respect to the shoreline. So there's currently 2 boathouses that exist along the shoreline. There's a dock associated with the boathouse and 2 other docks. What's proposed is this, and a pool in the front yard area. What's proposed through this application and through the accompanying site plan would be to remove the pool from the front yard to allow for a renaturalization of that area, removal of the 2 boathouses, removal of all of the docks, but then an installation of 2 docks with some fingers on them for boat parking, which I'll show. So we believe it's a net improvement on the shoreline area. But that's effectively what's requested through the zoning bylaw amendment and the shoreline area portion of it. So just in terms of the history, the overall development concept really hasn't changed. It's the same number of units associated with the site, 48 units. Then the previous zoning approval was granted in 2004 and 2024 and 2025. But really, we're seeking zoning, some specific details, as Jeff mentioned, along Port Severn Road, due to the nature of the semi-detached units along the waterfront, and then specifically dealing with the shoreline structures. This is the landscape plan, and I'll flip to another one in a second. But as you can note from this plan, the 2 docking structures that are shown on sort of the left side So we've pushed those docking structures as far away from the more emergent fish habitat on the site, which is off to the right-hand side. It does identify sort of in white the existing docks and boathouses along the shoreline. Those would all be removed as part of this proposal. And I will note there is a water lot associated with the site because, as you're aware, much of Gloucester Pool and Little Lake is flooded lands. So the subject lands do actually go out into the water in this case. In terms of the building that's proposed, these are the renderings of the semi-detached units along the shoreline on the top drawing, and then an elevation drawing of the townhouse units or apartment units that are along Port Severn Road. This is a rendering that really shows the modifications to the shoreline. So if you were to compare this to the first image that you saw with the pool in the front yard and the boathouses and the 4 docks, what's proposed are, again, some finger docks with boat parking, a renaturalization of some of the shoreline. We're seeking permission to have a few platforms for seating along the shoreline, which are sort of in there's one here with a shade structure for people to enjoy the waterfront and an opportunity for a fire pit along the waterfront. So that's sort of a rendering and a scaling of what's anticipated along the shoreline, and an illustration of the location of the proposed units on the shoreline of the property. So just specifically, so you understand what's at play here. The first item is reclassifying the units to reflect sort of where your future zoning bylaw intends to go, and this is really a request of staff. So in that, the units that are along the shoreline would be described as 4-plex units. So again, no real change to what's being proposed from the previous, it's just a change in nomenclature. The units that are along Port Severn Road would be referred to as apartments. Again, same situation, no real change to the development concept, but reflecting where your future zoning bylaw is headed. What's proposed is describing the interior side yard setbacks, both for 2 meters for the adjacent to the yellow area, which is the 4-plex, and then a minimum of 4 meters for the apartments. You can see the apartments are actually much more than 4 meters from the interior side yard because we've got driveways on both sides. And then a tweak to the parking ratio of the site. It's currently at 1.8 spaces on the site per unit. We're proposing to go to 1.7. What that equates to is a reduction in 1 parking space. The difference in parking space was we had to locate a transformer on the site, and because of the location of the transformer, we had to lose a parking space because of that. The required number of spaces that are proposed here still would comply with the bylaw as it relates to apartments and 4-plex units. The other variances that are being sought through this application relate to encroachments. So currently there's a 19.5 meter front yard setback. So that's the setback from the dwelling to the water. We're seeking an encroachment of 1.6 meters for the wing wall, which is that area in red. So how the side of the building projects, effectively where the patio area is. And then we're seeking a 2.5 meter projection for the balcony, because the balcony would extend past the edges of the wing wall. So those are the projections that are being sought from the current zoning bylaw standard. And again, that's a function of the design of the proposal. The other setback that's being sought is a 0 meter rear yard setback to Port Severn Road. And this is something that your staff has recommended. Currently, the setback we've identified in blue on the bottom drawings, it's about 3.6 meters on the side of the building closest to the locks. And then it gets closer to the parking structure gets as close as 0.5 meters on some of the interior units. But we've requested a 0 meter rear yard setback. And why a 0 meter rear yard setback? It's really because that's a reflection of what the urban design guidelines anticipate for Port Severn Road, is basically buildings up as close to the street as possible to create a more urban context. The other proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw are some site-specific requests to deal specifically with the shoreline. So in that regard, permission for freestanding decks. So that's what I identified along the shoreline, is we'd be getting rid of the existing docks, getting rid of the pool area. But there needs to be a location for residents to have some amenity in proximity to the water. And we thought the freestanding decks provided a good protection of the shoreline, but also balancing that opportunity for some recreational space. And that those are identified in brown. Permission for a maximum of 3, either pergola, gazebos, or saunas. We haven't specifically confirmed exactly what will be located with respect to those, but a maximum of 3 of any of combination of those. So the current site plan shows a pergola on one of the freestanding decks to be a shade structure, and then identifies a sauna down in the bottom corner. We haven't specifically located another gazebo, but the proposed zoning would provide some flexibility to allow up to 3 structures in the front yard of that property, which we think is a net benefit considering the removal of the boathouses and the structures that currently exist along the shoreline today. So just sort of in summary, it's the zoning bylaw amendment currently allows for 53 units per hectare. That's not proposed to change. We currently have a minimum front yard setback of 19.5 meters. We're seeking permission for those encroachments I've identified. Permission for specifically the covered walkways, which were previously included as well, but we've included some additional setback requirements from the lot lines. The ZBA also proposes to lift the holding provision when we get to council considering the amendment. We know that's not on the table for council today. There's a few extra items that need to be confirmed and comments that need to be addressed before staff bring a bylaw back to council for consideration. So in summary, we have reviewed the document in accordance with the various provincial planning statement, the district OP, and the township official plan. And it's our opinion that the proposed applications does implement this plan development concept for the site. It recognizes some improvements to the shoreline area that are necessary to provide the recreational amenity that folks would consider for a property of this nature. And one of the closing points I just want to leave council and the public with is that the unique aspect of this property, yes, there are some natural heritage features and some fish habitat associated with the shoreline. We have done our consultants have done a comprehensive review of those features. There's been a peer review completed by the municipality's consultant, which we are addressing the comments identified through that peer review. But it's important to note that this site is within a settlement area. It's in an area with municipal water and municipal sewage services. And it's an area that's designated for residential development in your official plan. And it's our opinion that this proposed development does strike that appropriate balance between protecting natural heritage features along the shoreline with providing access to shoreline and recreational amenities that one would expect within a shoreline area of a settlement area in a municipality. So with that, I thank you for your time. If there's any questions, I can do my best to try to answer those. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Does the applicant wish to add anything? No hands raised, and is well, all right, so if there's I don't see any hands raised amongst the public online or in-house. So therefore, I will now turn it over to council, and Councillor Bochek has had his hand up for some time. Councillor Bochek.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor, I have a number of Jeff Crockey and the planner. First of all, I want to say I have no conflict of interest because this is going to resolve it, or it's going to go to district as well too for approval. I sit on district council, so there should be no conflict there. One of the things I've repeatedly asked for from the planning department is labeling the body of water, the location of the body of water, Now, this is on Little Lake, part of Gloucester Pool, which I don't believe was named anywhere. And it is the site of the former Sunny Lee Cottage Resort, which I don't see anywhere there, which can allow counselors to know where to go and visit and visualize what's on the plan here. I don't see our fire chief here. I think our fire chief should be a very important part of this because fire protection and access to these buildings is going to be of great importance, which I think needs to be addressed. The waterfront plan, to me personally, doesn't work. You have 40 units, you have 40 families, whatever. You don't have dockage for 40 boats, not even anywhere near. Okay. And the same goes for parking. If you have 2 cars per family, 40 units, that's 80 cars plus their visitors, which I'm sure they're going to have lots of visitors living on waterfront property. We don't want parking on the street because it's a very narrow road. So we need to address the parking issue as well too. Setbacks are another issue. We know for a fact as council that this corporation bought the property immediately next door to Sunny Lee Cottages and applied for a permit to make it into a real estate office. This becomes the next door, which when you need to contact them to see if the setbacks are okay, of course, they're going to say the setbacks are okay, being limited to what they are. And not only that, but I believe it leaves the ability for them to increase the size of their development by using that piece of property and joining that piece of property together with the existing property. These are all a few of the questions of concern, and I would gladly to take up the rest of my questions with planner Jeff Krake or our director of planning, or even Jamie if need be. But there's a lot of questions that need to be answered here, and the public, which is very small, of the township of Georgian Bay or Port Severn, is very concerned about the congestion on this very, very small portion of the road before Lock 45. So many concerns and many answers before I can look forward to passing someday of this resolution. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Krake.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to try and start with the easy question first. Names on maps, we've just recently had an update to GeoHub. So these maps were produced using the old version of GeoHub. I do not know yet what the new GeoHub does in terms of water body names, but generally speaking, we don't have control over that as staff, but we can ask district staff whether that's something that can be done with the new GeoHub.
But my question for that question, if you don't mind through you, Mayor, would be because to note the location and the boat traffic, I don't see anything here for a report from the MNRF or Transport Canada about all the extra boat traffic that's going to be wandering through these little channels and getting out to Lock 45. So I think that needs to be added too. That's just in addition to what we're talking on location here.
So again, the docks that are being removed versus the docks that are being replaced are approximately an equal number of boat spaces. The boat ramp is being removed, and therefore boating traffic that would enter the water body without docking and use the water body from these lands should actually reduce. So a boating study was not required by the pre-application consultation that took place long before any of the current staff arrived here at the Township of Georgian Bay.
Right, but we had 6 cottages and now we have 40 units. So if you're saying that the dockage hasn't changed, it's remained the same, that will not work for this new development.
And
So
then
whether there's 6 existing docks and there's going to be 6 new docks, it's not going to service this property. So we need to look at that too.
And then we have, as staff, we have no appreciation or understanding how the developer intends to sell these units. The anticipation is that it will become a condominium development. And the assumption is that certain units will have certain rights and other units will not. But we don't know that. That's something that would be decided later when a condominium application would be made and those rules of that condominium corporation are decided. Again, I think what's before council right now is that there is to be removal of 2 boathouses. So the 2 boathouses are being proposed for demolition. There's removal of the boat ramp and the docks associated with the boat ramp. And there is a replacement essentially of the 2 existing docks. But perhaps Jamie would like to answer that question before I move to your last question.
Through your worship, just in terms of boat parking, there is an ability to park between 24 and 26 boats based on the layout that's been proposed. So with 48 units, yes, there's not enough parking for every unit to have a boat. There are, I will note, a number of marinas in Port Severn and in the area, and it's not necessarily that everybody, it's a similar to a parking situation. If somebody wants to purchase a boat slip with their unit, they could purchase a boat slip, but it's a question of availability. Secondly, you had mentioned a question about sufficient parking to be available. What's proposed here is a 1 space reduction over what was currently granted by council for this 48 unit development. And I would just also elaborate that the units that are proposed are 2-bedroom units. Every unit is a 2-bedroom unit. So we're not dealing with 4 and 5-bedroom cottage units where you typically have the whole family come up and visit and stay overnight and huge demands for parking. These are 2-bedroom units. So they're designed for smaller families or a couple of people with a guest possibly. So the parking demands that are anticipated for this site and that were studied by our parking consultant are less than what you typically see on a rural shoreline property outside of a settlement area, for example.
And that's a very similar answer to the one I would have given to your 3rd question. The 4th question you'd asked was with respect to fire and emergency services. I've been actively discussing this application with our fire chief, and we are still discussing certain issues with the applicant under the site plan control process. But essentially, there's been a lot of improvements to what's being proposed from what was originally before council, and there are still items for further discussion, but that is not actually a part of the zoning bylaw amendment application. None of those items actually would fall under the rezoning request, with the exception of the fire pits, which again, the agent has no idea what our new question is going to be, and so I don't think it's appropriate to discuss it today.
I believe it is important to discuss today because by this council honoring this approval without all this information previous, I think it's important for everyone to know all the information. And this is just one counselor asking about things like parking. There's no parking lot. There's so many complications with this, it isn't funny. So I believe that the questions that need to be asked need to be answered before we move ahead with any approval in zoning at this point in time. These are my personal feelings, Mr. Krake. It's not the feelings of council.
No, I appreciate that, Councillor. And again, I'm not diminishing your questions. I thought Jamie gave you a good answer with respect to traffic and parking. The only item I might add with respect to parking is that part of the Port Severn Village Center plan is to actually encourage pedestrians to walk on the street. And while the Port Severn Village Center plan is very much a work in progress, there are public parking lots within the village center. One is associated with the park at Lone Pine and Port Severn Road North. And the other, of course, is associated with this building. And so while those do not provide overnight parking abilities, they certainly do provide for overflow parking availability. In one case for a fee, in another case without a fee, for any uses within the Port Severn Village Center. And again, the idea of that village center was ultimately that there be a pedestrian-friendly street environment. Admittedly, this is the first development to try and implement that center. So it may be a little difficult to imagine what that village will look like in the future, but that has been the plan since 2009 of this township.
Thank you. Councilor Precco, please.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor, I just have a kind of couple of quick observations and really that goes back to the landscaping and the freestanding decks on the waterfront with gazebos and saunas and pergolas. Just noting that our current zoning bylaws don't allow those things in the front yard, so that has been taken into account, and especially gazebos and pergolas not being on decks at the shoreline too. So this is an exception that we're making for the site plan.
Most certainly, and I think as staff, we're very interested in what council's comments are in that respect. I think there have been, and I don't want to exaggerate, but I think there have been more than one a person in our municipality who's been interested in these types of, I'll call them recreational platforms on the water's edge. And so far, what we have allowed is a very modest freestanding deck, which can only go up to that high water mark. And in this case, they are proposing these recreational platforms would go beyond the high water mark. So it is something new. As staff, we are very interested in what you as council and what the public has to say, because certainly it is the request of the developer. And that is new information before council that was not requested the last time this development was here.
Thank you. And then I think that does lead into our zoning and official plan review conversations that this development may impact the conversation later on down the road for the bigger review. But anyway, I'm just observing it. I don't really have an opinion. I don't think, I think the intention is not to fill the shoreline with structures, as you know, but I'm assuming right now the three are modest in the overall structure, the overall landscape, but the sauna near the water's edge would be the only other thing that if there's drainage or other chemicals and leach towards the water, is there any other concerns that the township should have with, and I know people do this without permits all the time, but are there concerns, or is there again a precedent that we're going to be introducing for people to come forward with other zoning applications or minor variances in the future?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the HESL, our environmental consultants, have asked a number of questions with respect to both the ongoing maintenance operation of those types of recreational activities, but also the construction, because of course, previously we were talking about construction mitigation quite some distance from the shore. These structures would be either right on the shore and or beyond the shoreline. And so that's part of the peer review comments that we'll receive from Hutchinson.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Jarvis.
Yes, and thank you, through the mayor. Question one is the district has would prefer that we deferred. Can you be more specific about the reasoning for district's comments?
So the district writes their comments long before my report is available, so they write it in a vacuum. What I can say is that there are some key studies that are still necessary, one of which is associated with the holding provision for the servicing of these lands. And although one might hope that there's not been a significant change in the servicing capabilities of these facilities, given that there's not been any development on Island K that I am aware of. My understanding is that the the pumping station essentially at Port Severn Road, Honey Harbor Road, and Lone Pine is one of the sort of major capacity constraints in the sanitary sewage system for Port Severn. And everything flows to it before it gets pushed to the plant. So that study is, I believe, expected either late this month or sometime next month. And the district was very concerned with this hold being removed before that. I think the district's other concerns had to do with some of the other issues that are still outstanding and being discussed and are part of the peer review comments that council has received from both Hutchinson and from Ainley. And I'm very comfortable and confident that before we come back to council with a request for a decision, that we'll have all the answers.
Just as follow-up. So today we are discussing, are we expecting, you want some decisions here today? We want to lift the hold? No? Okay. So this is just for further discussion.
This is the public meeting
Right.
for input,
Making sure.
and our decision is to postpone making a decision.
Yeah. One other question is just to follow up to Councillor Bocek's comments about traffic, and that is snow removal is usually part of any road work we do in these types of little communities, and is that being considered as well?
So I think snow removal continues to be of great interest to us. It's something normally dealt with in site plan control. And so it's not something that really affects the zoning bylaw amendment application. And I'm going to let Jamie answer the question the way he would like to before you today.
To your worship, Councillor Jarvis. So Jeff's right in terms of snow removal, this application as well as the site plan application, and this kind of goes for the fire comments previously as well. All of those, the site plans circulated to all of the departments, including fire and emergency services and public works and the district, because it's a district road here, through the site plan process, where they can provide comments with respect to the design and their operational considerations, so turning movements and things like that. To date, we haven't received anything from the municipality or from the district expressing any concerns that this would impact their snow removal. My understanding with snow removal is it's intended to occur within the municipal right of way. We're not seeking any reductions to the municipal right of way at all. So those comments are really specific to that site plan process, and would be addressed through that mechanism. If there is a concern, but again, we're not proposing anything within the municipal road allowance.
I guess my concern was I was making sure that it's being considered, and you've just answered that question, Jamie, so I appreciate that. Generally speaking, I think the concept is good. It's in an area where we want that kind of development, so I'm hoping we can move ahead in a way that works for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the report. I don't pretend to be an expert on urban development by any means, but do have a few questions just sort of from looking at this. And I realize that you're getting feedback today. That's what the purpose of this meeting is. But I have a list of about 5 or 6 things here. I'll be some of them of which have been mentioned, including I happen to agree with Councillor Bocek that it's really important to know the specific area, the history, those kinds of things that is useful. And if GeoHub doesn't have it on GeoHub, why do we care? Let's find out ourselves. So I would encourage that we find out and don't throw it over the fence at GeoHub. Parking, insufficient. These are really random things. High water mark. I didn't know we had high water marks, and we have on Georgian Bay. We have water elevations relative to flood elevations and so forth. I'm still in competition with you on that subject. I don't like the use of high water mark because high water is a long-term curve versus a spring curve. So I think it's misleading. intensification at the water's edge. That is concerning me as well. So there are a few points for you to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelton.
Thank you. I think you've made great progress on this application. Thank you very much for that. I like a lot of things that you've been doing here. I am wanting though to be sensitive to what Councillor Bocek expressed, which was some of the differences of use between what's there today and what's likely going to be there in the future. And one of the things that we all got frustrated with last term was we were entertaining a trailer park and we didn't have a shorefront plan. We were told we couldn't get it, whatever. But I think what Councillor Bocek is getting at here is a full picture of what is likely going to be there. And I think he's right. You're going to have a lot more people on this property. And we have a F1 habitat, I think that's what you've said, right in front of it. And right now, I think from one of your pictures, there was what, maybe 3 or 4 boats there. But you've got a ton of units. And I'll just hark back to a question that I asked last time this came forward, which is there an opportunity to predefine a relationship with one of the other properties in that area where they have boat launches and docks and things like that, where it could be set up front that the purchasers of these units or the renters of these units will know up front that don't think about putting a boat out front. You're going to go around the corner to some other property and use their dock facilities when you want to get in your boat. And I think that that kind of pre-definition, helping us understand what this waterfront plan might look like and how to accommodate all these extra people. And I'm not suggesting for a second we can't. I'm just saying that I don't see the plan articulated. And what I would hate to see is we give approval now, not knowing what the future is going to be like. And then the applicant comes back and says, well, now that we've got this in place, now we want to do this. And it's like, oh, well, we've already given you approval to do that. And now we really feel like we have to give you approval to do this, but we really didn't want to. So having the full picture in play and having all these smaller nuances sorted out, I think is important. Thank you.
Thank you. I think part of what I'm hearing from some of my fellow councillors is concern about, I'll call it the density of this development, though we've already approved it. And so, you know, but what I'm seeing here is that we approved the proposal put in front of us whenever it was a year ago or something. I can't remember the exact timeline. And now, as they get into the details, they're asking for a little bit more. And like, for instance, they're projecting in front of the existing units that we approved. They now want to put sidewalls that are 1.6 meters. And then even further than that, balconies that end up being 2.5 meters in front of this. So they are expanding their footprint in effect. And they're building a very high density development on this property, in my opinion. But we've already approved it. Was it 53 units per hectare level? But I have a couple of concerns with all of this. And one is when we're talking about the rear yard setback is 0 meters. And yet we're having discussions about the village atmosphere and people walking along sidewalks and things like that. Well, in the middle of winter, where's that sidewalk going to be? Underneath an oversized snowbank from the road? I'm concerned about that. The various drawings that I saw, they show trees. How are you planting trees in a 0 setback? And what is that? And to me, it's vitally important. What does that streetscape, if I can use the phrase, what does that streetscape look like And will it be friendly, or will it be one of those bleeping walls that you're forced to walk past in some urban development that may have some fancy brickwork in it, but nonetheless, you've got bricks that far from your nose. I exaggerate only slightly. So that to me is vitally important, is that if we even want to consider giving them a less setback from the road, I think it's extremely important to know what it's going to look like. Because it's basically going to be a wall of 2 apartment buildings with slight gaps in between. And if they're building a wall that nobody wants to walk past, well, then we're totally destroying the village concept that was imagined whenever it was 15 years ago or something, when that was put, or 20 years ago. I'm not sure how old that concept was. So to me, that's one thing that's vitally important. Going to the other side of the property, a proposal of a sauna. Well, if many people use a sauna, that what they want to do at some point, they want to go jump in the lake. And I'd like to know on that waterfront, because I haven't seen it designated, and if I've missed something, then please correct me. Where are people going to be allowed to swim versus not swim? Because if we're talking about fish habitat that we're trying to respect, we want people to stay out of certain areas. And so to me, that's something that's very important, is where will that sauna be if it ever got approved? Where are people going to be jumping in the lake? And to what degree is that going to be, what effect will that have on the fish habitat? Is there a planned swimming area? We have 48 units here. Let's call it somewhere between 100 and 150 people in those units on a long weekend in the summer. And if it's weather like it is today, some of those people are going to be jumping in the lake because the swimming pool's gone. And I think things like that, we have to think through with this extra density. I mean, I've made this explanation to our residents as long as I've been sitting in this chair. We have so many more people living in the township, therefore we need more rules and regulations just because of the density of the population township. Well, this is going to be one of the most densely populated little piece of land that we have in our township. And I think we have to be pretty clear of what we're going to allow or not allow folks to do if we're going to pretend, and I hope it's more than just pretend, if we're going to pretend that we have respect for fish habitat, well, we got to leave those fish be. And we got to leave those turtles be. I got at least one smirk. But I think that's very important. And I would like to see that. A, what is it going to look like from the street, but also what is it actually going to look like from the water, not only from the canoeist going by, but the fish and turtle going by.
Mr. Mayor, would it help if I shared a screen, an elevation of what it will look like from the street?
I certainly want to see that before I know we're not approving anything today, but
No.
But I think that's, to me, that's one very important aspect of this whole development.
And just bear with me one moment because it wasn't a part of my presentation, so I will bring something up and share it momentarily. I'm going to try and zoom in on the elevation that's facing Port Severn Road if I can get to the zooms behind the Zoom menu. So the buildings that face the water, the apartment buildings on the garages, will look like this on that internal laneway that is a private laneway. And this lower part is the parking garage's exposure. When it goes to the frontage, and this is the building that is on the approximately the west side of the site along Port Severn Road, you can see that the parking garage towards the driveway begins to become something that stands out. And certainly through site plan control, one of the questions I've asked from a landscaping perspective is, how are we going to address this? Are there going to be plantings, et cetera, et cetera? And those are things that are still being discussed. But what will be visible from the road are these stairs that go up into the entranceways to these units. And so these stairways give a very, I think, village-like feel to Port Severn Road. And those stairways are essentially the nearest part to Port Severn Road. And as you proceed towards the middle of the site, there's almost nothing visible of the parking garage below. And just from a site plan perspective, we were just looking now at this frontage here. So if you're on the sidewalk, you would see these stairs that come close to Port Severn Road, but do not actually make the 0 meter mark. The nearest point at this time is this corner of the parking garage, which as Jamie showed was 0.5 meters setback from the roadway. But again, that is mostly underground, so someone wouldn't perceive it necessarily as a building at 0 meters. And there would in fact be trees along this frontage on the private lands and other landscaping to attenuate the feel and create that village center feel.
I'm just concerned with those 10 trees that you have on this site plan. Where are the roots going if we have 0 meter setback allowed?
So again, that's a detail that I'm going to let Jamie address if he wishes. There is a landscaping plan, and neither Ainley nor Hutchinson had any concern with those trees.
Yeah, but I'm allowed to have a concern.
To your worship, we'll take those comments back, and as part of our review and resubmission and revised materials, we'll make sure we've addressed we'll have something that shows you what the streetscape looks like, details about how the vegetation along that streetscape can be maintained and will be maintained. And
I appreciate it, and I don't want to sound like I was trained in advertising, but to me, with greater density comes greater responsibility to the community. And I think that's extremely important. And I have full expectations that you and your clients will live up to that greater responsibility, because you're stuffing a lot of people on this piece of property. With that, I see Councillor Bocek wants to start a second round.
Mr. Mayor, did you want your second question discussed, or are you okay with?
Well, if you got an answer for the swimming
Well,
area.
I don't, and it's one of the questions I
Please
share
get
with
one.
you. It's one of the questions I share with you. And we're really speaking to these structures, which again, Jamie's already addressed in his presentation, and again, here there is a regulated water level, a high water level, which is a flood line. And then there's of course wave uprush and other lines, but these structures, as Jamie mentioned, are meant at this stage in the zoning bylaw not to be locked in. They will need to be locked in at site plan, but at this stage they're shown to you for illustration. But essentially some of them project quite some distance out over the water's edge. And your other question was about this beach area, which I did have an air photo. Let me see if I can. Sure. So there is an existing beach, which Jamie will display momentarily. It's also though associated with turtles. And so, yes, your questions and comments are well taken. And I think Hutchinson has already asked some of them.
All right, thank you.
maybe I can just add one final closing remark on that point, is that so from a swimming perspective, I think everybody, when they looks at this shoreline, would say this isn't an ideal shoreline situation with grass to the water and structures and what's going on there. It is legal non-conforming as it exists today, though. So they would have the ability to maintain those structures and replace those structures as it exists. What's proposed through the concept is a more renaturalization of the shoreline, or removal of the beach. Swimming would occur off the docks. And that's what we're working with your environmental consultant and our environmental consultant to try to achieve an improvement over the shoreline area. So I've heard the comments today. We'll take those comments back and provide a little bit more detail. But I just want to be clear is that we are working to try to renaturalize as best as possible the shoreline area and improve the current state while still providing some recreational amenity, which currently exists today and which would need to, I think, reasonably need to exist for any type of residential development in a settlement area. So that's the balancing act as planners were considering, myself, and I'm sure Mr. Kratky as well, and even the environmental consultants as well, is how can we improve the existing situation here on a reasonable level? Because the owners do have the ability to maintain the current status quo from a shoreline perspective if they wanted to. But they don't. They want to improve things. I'm just making that clear for council.
Current
But
status,
we'll illustrate that further in our next, when we come back to council.
current status quo has a lot fewer people. Councillor Bocek.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Mayor, I'm going to keep this a little shorter than my first diatribe. There was no mention of the 80 slip marina that is right next door. And it's not in your pictures either. South Bay Cove Marina is an 80 slip marina adjacent to this, right next door to this property. And I think that goes back to my DFO, my Transport Canada, everything else for the volume of boats that are going through there. It'll come later, and I know it'll be a part of the details. My other question is the road that this is on. The road starts at the Highway 400, and it's the MTO's responsibility for snow removal, repair, everything else. As you continue up this road, you run into the District of Muskoka Road, which is also on here. And we know what District of Muskoka Class 2 roads or low volume roads, how they're maintained. Just look at South Bay Road. Years and years and years trying to get it fixed through the district, and it's still a mess. So then we have Parks Canada owns the road going up to the locks. We have 4 ownerships of that road. A, who's going to maintain it all? B, the increased traffic is going to change, hopefully change the status of the road because of the volume of traffic on the road, and we may get better service as far as road repairs, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd like in the details that are going to be coming back, A, addressing the marina next door, and B, the road itself from Highway 400 up that road, the increased traffic, whether it's coming from the Severn side across Lock 45 into this development or from the 400 coming off the 400 going in this development. That's a lot of traffic. Increase in traffic. So we need to declare, or we need to discover from district, MTO, Township of Georgian Bay, and everybody else that this road is going to be maintained for the residents of Port Sutton.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, the peer-reviewed transportation and traffic study is still attached to this application. And our peer reviewers were satisfied that the traffic is supportable on this road. You may recall that one of the early recommendations of our peer reviewer was to lower the speed limit on the road. And that was, of course, done by the district. That was the only concern our peer reviewer had at this time with respect to traffic volumes. In terms of the minor reduction in parking that's being asked for with this zoning bylaw amendment application to accommodate a Hydro One transformer on the lands, our peer reviewer did not have any concerns with that small reduction in parking. And you may recall that the 1.8 parking spaces per unit was what was requested and achieved during the last round. And again, there is a small reduction to 1.77, but our peer reviewer has not indicated any concern at this point in time with that small reduction. But I can provide those answers when I next bring this
I
back.
appreciate that because we know from the development over at an adjacent development over here with the new waterfront condos. There's a car in the driveway and half the car sticks out onto the road. Maybe that's 1.75 and 0.75 is sticking out on the road. I don't know. But we need to address that parking as well too. And thank you, Jeff, for the report.
Excuse me, thank you, Councillor Gratiano.
Thank you. And through your mayor, I haven't had a chance to speak yet. So, you know, through discussions and constant discussions with my constituency, and perhaps it's already been articulated, I forgive me for having to step out on a personal matter. But the consensus amongst the residents still is the massing of this development or this proposed development. I understand the applicant has now purchased an abutting property as well and would likely seek some development there as well. And perhaps the visual that Mr. Robertson has been putting up over and over again will expand beyond just what we see and continue that massing along that shoreline. The concern that I have, you know, and I understand that this is zoned in an area that potentially could accommodate this type of development is, you know, just the fairness of everything to the homeowner and to other property owners on the pool as well as in the surrounding areas. I have a few pieces of information that I tried to seek out of here and was unable to find, so perhaps staff can support me on this. What is the overall size by way of acreage for this particular lot?
I'm sorry, I don't have that before me right now, but maybe Jamie does.
Which is how many acres? Is it 2.2?
Something like that,
Acre,
because
2
because
acre.
the density is 53 units per hectare and they have 48 units. Therefore, doing my math, it's just under a hectare.
So it's under 2 acres. Which converts into how many acres, out of curiosity? 1.75 acres, 1.8 acres. There's lots on 6 Mile Lake that are much larger than that are only allowed a single dwelling and are confined by lot coverage and massing and so on. And so, you know, when we look at things, why does a developer get to put as many units as they've outlined here today, but yet an applicant that has a larger lot in a different area doesn't? And I understand it's zoning, and I understand it's a rhetorical question, but to me, this massing is just it's not sitting well with the residents that have come to me and have shown concerns. And then in addition to that, all of the other things that the applicant is seeking to add as part of incentivization for people to purchase is I think just adds to it all. So my concern again still stays with the massing of this and the fairness overall. I did have an additional question. I'm going to reserve back to in case anyone else wishes to have a.
No, go for it now. You're on round 2.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. The second question that I had was with regards to this. I'm assuming it is being connected to our to the district services. Is that correct?
Absolutely. This development would not be allowed to proceed if there is either a capacity issue in the systems
Mhm.
or if there is some unforeseen connection problem. The services do exist in the road in front of it, so I can't imagine there being a problem with connection. So it becomes one of capacity, and that's one of the studies that is underway, and that district staff have asked you not to make a decision until it's received.
And so my understanding is if that is the case, then the environmental burden would be more so the usage of people coming and going and perhaps doing what people tend to do, but not necessarily any of their normal morning routines. My last question, if I can, to Jamie is what percentage is slated for low income housing, if any?
Your worship, to the counselor, I don't think any of the proposed units would meet the threshold for affordable housing or low income housing, particularly given its shoreline based development.
So then, thank you. And further to that, then the question to this council is, well, are we not here to try to find ways and creative ways of accommodating low-income housing and future development? And that's, again, a question to council openly. Thank you.
Thank you. Not seeing any more hands raised. Who is?
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
My name's Wes Fordyke. I'm part of the applicant group here. I just want to jump on quickly and say just a closing couple remarks. I was not part of the previous application when this came before you last time to get to seek the density that has been approved for the site. I do want everyone in this meeting to understand that we've been working diligently to try to honor the approval that we've received, make it work from an engineering and a constructability standpoint. And then lastly, when we are discussing the shoreline, to improve on that visibly from the water and naturalize it relative to what's there today. So with respect to Councillor Hazelton's request for more details, this zoning request that is before you today came out of our site plan drawings. So drawings that are the basis for what we want to construct. So this is not another far off concept. This is detailed design where we're trying to go to, and what, if approved, that approval will come along at the same time as a site plan approval, which ingrains what we're doing there and have to construct on the site. So we're not trying to do something that's going to drastically change. A couple other comments regarding infrastructure and increased traffic and use of public infrastructure. There will be development charges paid to do this development, around $1.2 million given in development charges, and will increase your property tax basis by over $250,000 a year going forward. So there will be more funds for infrastructure. Lastly, we'll do our best to address all your comments, give more details so that we can have a better discussion when we are before you for a vote, hopefully in August. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for your comments. Just for future reference, normally I appreciate the applicant or agents of the applicant to speak before council starts asking their questions. So next time, if you wouldn't mind identifying yourself sooner, it would be appreciated.
Understood.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. I'm not seeing more hands, so I'm now going to read the motion, which is moved by Councillor Jarvis, seconded by Councillor Predko. Be it resolved, the Council for the Township of Georgian Bay accepts all information regarding zoning bylaw amendment application number Z26-14 presented at the public meeting on July 14th, 2026, and that refers all said information and comments to township staff for further discussion with the agent, district staff, and anyone who commented. And the township staff shall not schedule the next meeting of council to evaluate the application until after comments are addressed. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. This concludes the Planning Act public meeting portion of our agenda. All comments, questions, and concerns raised at the public meeting have been recorded and will be taken into consideration by staff prior to recommendations being brought forward. And now declare this public meeting closed at 10:24 a.m. Thank you very much. I'm now calling a break for 10 minutes. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to do the planning application staff reports portion of our meeting. And our first one is the official plan amendment application 026-01 and zoning bylaw amendment application Z2604 for 146 Prisque Road. And to our planner, Ms. Wanfor.
Thank you, and through the mayor. The subject property is a peninsula with an area of 2,035 square meters and a frontage of 55.88 meters on Georgian Bay. The lands front onto Toby's Bay provincially significant wetland located in Sunset Bay. A public meeting was held on April 14th. The District of Muskoka initially recommended refusal of the application because of structures being located within a provincially significant wetland, contrary to the provincial planning statement and Muskoka official plan policies, and requested an Ontario Wetland Evaluation System assessment to confirm the PSW boundaries. Following additional environmental work and an Ontario Wetland Evaluation System assessment, district planning staff no longer object to the applications. Planning staff required a site evaluation report, flood hazard policy justification, confirmation of the dwelling's minimum opening elevation, a revised environmental impact study addressing the township consultant's comments, and revisions to the zoning application to include rezoning of the water where the docks are located. All required studies and updated supporting materials have been submitted. To address Council's concerns regarding potential impacts to the PSW and the location of dock number 1 during low water conditions, the applicant has agreed to limit dock 1 to non-motorized watercraft, require any motorized boat access to follow a defined low-impact navigation route at no wake speeds, and rely on dock number 2 as the primary docking facility for motorized boats, particularly during periods of low water. Regarding Council's remarks on the proposed dwelling appearing as 3 stories, the applicant has provided updated elevation drawings demonstrating the height measured from average natural grade at the front of the dwelling and associated grading. The purpose and effect of the applications is to introduce the site-specific exception policy in the township's official plan to permit 2 docks currently appertinent to the subject lands within a provincially significant wetland. The PSW is zoned environmental protection provincially significant wetland, and the applicant is proposing to rezone the areas where the docks are located to an environmental protection provincially significant wetland exception zone. The applicant is also proposing to remove the EP-PSW zone from the subject lands, as supported by the Ontario Wetland Evaluation System assessment, which refined the wetland boundary and confirmed that it does not encroach onto the property. The property will be rezoned to a shoreline residential island type 1 exception zone to facilitate the expansion and reconstruction of the legal non-complying shoreline dwelling and to bring an accessory shed into compliance. The shed has a front lot line and environmental protection zone setback of 14.56 meters, whereas a 20-meter front yard and 15-meter EP-PSW setback are required, and has a separation of 1.33 meters from the sleeping cabin, where a minimum separation of 5 meters is required. Note that the sleeping cabin was constructed in 1940 and is legal non-complying. The development also includes a deck expansion on the front or west elevation of the dwelling, a new deck with a porch on the south side, which wraps around the rear or west elevation, where a new entryway is also proposed. The applicant proposes to increase the dwelling's gross floor area by 76.5% or 169.25 square meters, which is attributed to the second-story addition, new entryway, and new porch. The deck and porch will have reduced setbacks of 4.7 meters and 5 meters respectively to the high water mark and EP-PSW zone. The building height is increasing to 8.53 meters, measured from average natural grade at the front of the dwelling to the midpoint between the peak and eaves of the roof. Approximately half of the dwelling, a portion of the deck expansion, porch, and the new rear entry are located within the natural state shoreline area, being the area within 15 meters of the high water mark. A shoreline activity area shall be permitted within the natural state shoreline area to provide access to the shoreline and locations for land-based shoreline accessory buildings and structures. Within the Honey Harbor Coastal Waterfront Community, the shoreline activity area shall be a maximum of 25% of the natural state shoreline area and shall have a maximum width of 25% of the shoreline length. The applicant is seeking a shoreline activity area equivalent to 30%, having a width of 28% of the shoreline length. The L-shaped dock on the western shoreline, also referred to as Dock 2, was constructed between 2018 and 2023 without the issuance of a building permit. The section connecting to the land has a width of 4.27 meters, whereas a maximum width of 4 meters is permitted. The remainder of the dock complies with the applicable width, length, and projection requirements. An environmental impact study prepared by Astor Environmental Services assessed fish habitat, provincially significant wetlands, wildlife habitat, and potential species at risk habitat on and adjacent to the property. Following a peer review by Hutchinson Environmental Sciences Limited, Astor revised the EIS and provided addendum responses maintaining that the proposed development would not result in significant adverse impacts to natural heritage features. Hutchinson subsequently confirmed that most technical concerns had been resolved, although initial outstanding issues remain regarding fish habitat classification, dock and boating impacts, shoreline naturalization, and details pertaining to mitigation measures. In response, Astor prepared a second addendum that included additional fish habitat mapping, strengthened mitigation measures, restrictions on motorized use of dock number 1, enhanced tree protection requirements, and a shoreline restoration program using native seed mixes across approximately 60% of the natural state shoreline area. Astor clarified that all mitigation measures are mandatory and intended to ensure environmental compliance throughout construction and operation. Proposed mitigation includes erosion and sediment control, spill prevention and response measures, tree and vegetation protection, construction timing restrictions, and shoreline restoration. Hutchinson confirmed that all remaining concerns had been satisfactorily addressed and that the proposal is environmentally acceptable. Staff will ensure the mitigation measures are implemented through the site plan control process. Within the District of Muskoka official plan, the subject lands are designated waterfront area. Planning staff conducted a detailed analysis of the district's policies within the associated report and are of the opinion that the proposal conforms with their official plan as it maintains the established waterfront character, preserves key natural features, including the shoreline rock face and mature trees, and is compatible with the scale and form of surrounding development on Prisque Road. The proposal does not move the dwelling closer to the shoreline or wetland, and supporting environmental studies demonstrate that the PSW does not extend onto the subject lands, and the existing dock structures are not expected to negatively impact the wetland or its ecological functions. The applicant has also demonstrated compliance with applicable flood hazard requirements through minimum opening elevation standards. District planning staff support the applications. Within the Township of Georgian Bay official plan, the subject lands are designated waterfront and are located within the Honey Harbor Coastal Waterfront Community. Planning staff are of the opinion that the proposal conforms with the Township's official plan as the increase in building footprint is limited to 9.75 square meters and is located entirely within the rear yard, thereby avoiding further encroachment toward the shoreline. And while the porch contributes to the overall gross floor area, additional living space is primarily achieved through a second-story addition, reducing the need for further ground disturbance while preserving existing vegetation and site conditions. The proposal maintains the established pattern of development and includes vegetation protection and shoreline restoration measures, which will be secured through site plan control. Supporting studies demonstrate that the development can be accommodated on the property without adverse impacts to adjacent natural heritage features, subject to the implementation of recommended mitigation measures. Accordingly, staff are satisfied that the proposal maintains the intended balance between built form and the natural environment while protecting the ecological, recreational, and scenic qualities of the Honey Harbor waterfront. The lands are zoned shoreline residential island type 1, which permits a detached dwelling and accessory uses. The lands are partially zoned environmental protection provincially significant wetland. Recall the applicant is proposing to remove the EPPSW zone from the subject lands as supported by the wetland assessment, which refined the wetland boundary. As a result of the undersized lot, the existing dwellings reduce front yard setback and the property's close proximity to the water body and associated provincially significant wetland, amendments to provisions regulating lot coverage, setbacks from the high water mark and environmental protection zone, and permitted encroachments within the required 20-meter front yard setback are required. The zoning bylaw amendment also seeks a site-specific building height. However, the dwelling will remain 2 stories in height, conforming with the official plan. In addition, the proposal includes a gross floor area increase of 169.25 square meters, inclusive of the porch, which exceeds the expansion typically permitted for legal non-complying shoreline dwellings. Gross floor area is otherwise not regulated within the Honey Harbor Coastal Waterfront Community or the SRI 1 zone. Additional site-specific amendments discussed previously and summarized in the table shown are also required to facilitate the development. Pictured here is the existing dwelling and rear yard conditions. The front of the dwelling and south side yard are pictured here. Pictured here are photos of the property taken from the L-shaped dock or dock 2, which show the mature trees to be retained and the granite rock noted in the associated report. Here are additional photos of the dock and shoreline. Planning staff have conducted an analysis of applicable planning legislation and are recommending approval of the applications, including the adoption of an official plan amendment, which introduces a site-specific policy to permit 2 docks in a provincially significant wetland, and a zoning bylaw amendment, which zones the land's shoreline residential island type 1 exception, and the dock area's environmental protection provincially significant wetland exception, reflecting the development as proposed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your report. Council, any questions or comments? Councillor Bocek.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Seems like I'm always first, but you know why. I have too much to say.
Well, let's get on with it then.
During your report, it was mentioned several times that this is an island property, classed as island, whatever, just so council has some sort of knowledge of what this property is. You've seen in the pictures, there was our township inspector's car in the driveway. So
they have flotation, don't
yeah,
they?
flotation, I guess, to make it an island. But if you were to know Prisque Road is on the mainland, and there's a small little bridge that they drive over to get to the what they're calling an island. It's really a part of the mainland, but it's a private road. It's serviced privately. Their driveway is serviced privately. Well, septic bed, no township or district amenities whatsoever, except for fire service, whatever. But it sounds like it's an island like Minnecaug or something way out on way out on Georgian Bay somewhere, where it's really not. It's really, I really call it part of the mainland, but this bridge is about as long as this room that goes over to it. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the additional background information. Are you done?
Yes, just additional information for council
Okay.
because it was
No,
mentioned as an island, and I just wanted to clear.
Normally you turn your microphone off when you're done. Any other counselor wish to offer background information, comments, questions, what have you? Councilor Jarvis.
Thank you. And I've been trying to properly put this in perspective. I'm having trouble understanding the need for the second dock, but at the same time, all the way down that channel, there are docks all over the place, and here we are in an EPS and fish habitat area, and So I don't see that removing that dock is gonna have any net positive effect on anything anyway. But I do question that need by the owner for that second dock. And something we did discuss earlier on was the fact that it is almost on dry land and low water. I think you probably wouldn't even need the bridge to get across there in low water times. But I mean, I've made the statement. I observing all the other docks in the area. I guess it's really not a big hassle one way or the other, but it is something I still question. Other than that, I mean, the appearance of that house, the square footage, everything seems to be fitting in with everything else that's in the area anyway. As Councillor Bocek has noted, it's a very high concentration of development. And I don't think we can, just with this one application, change that scenario. Anyway, yeah, my question still remains for that one dock in the back, and that's it.
Thank you. Councillor Predko.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Councillor Jarvis reminded me, I made a note just to ask the planner, how can we enforce non-motorized boat on dock 1? And I mean, our bylaw enforcement team wouldn't be going out specifically looking for a motorized boat versus a non-motorized boat on a dock. And I just want to, I think it's a little bit along the lines of Councillor Jarvis's questions about the dock. It is another dock on that shoreline. What really are we achieving by putting restrictions on that dock? I was finished talking.
Through the mayor. So that was a recommendation and mitigation measure put in place by the environmentalist. What's going to happen with all of the studies and addendums, as well as the peer review comments, they're all going to form part of the site plan agreement and be registered on title. So the property owner will have to ensure that they're abiding by all those mitigation measures throughout the construction.
And that's what I figured would happen, but there's no active policing of motorized versus non-motorized boats anywhere. So I just wanted to make sure it was just part of the site plan, what's going on title, and it would be recorded. All right, thank you.
Most of our bylaws aren't actively, like many an approval have been made at this council, or people agree they're not going to do this or they will do that. And I think most people live up to it. Councillor Cooper, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be brief. I too wonder about the reason for having 2 docks, especially as it pertains to the second dock and basically access during low water years is very concerning to me. And you can say, well, it's happening in the area elsewhere. I don't think that's a good enough reason. If you add to the intensification, you just add to some disturbance of a very protected area that should be protected. And I'm concerned that that's what we would be approving here. So I do have, my feeling is that one dock is quite large and sufficient and should be able to service that property given the circumstances. So that's my view. One dock. Thank you.
Ms. Lemieux, you wanted to respond.
Thank you, Mayor. Only if you would permit me to do so.
I have now recognized you.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate these additional comments. I just wanted to add in a bit more context of the work that we've been doing since we came before you for the public meeting. The owners who are in fact in the audience this morning for you, in case you have any specific questions for them, we made sure, and the owners were very clear to us, that if the ecological review did deem that north dock to be of concern, that they understood that it would have to be removed. Through that review, through the ecology, their ecologists' follow-up review, through the addendum submission, as well as the peer review analysis by the township, it was deemed to not be a concern. So therefore, that is why the application still, you will see, includes that north dock. But when it comes to the intended use, I am confident, of course, that these owners are aware of the importance of remaining that dock to not require any motorized boats. And as you can see, even functionally, of course, the west dock will continue to be their primary. But just wanted to reiterate, if you have any questions for Chris and Sarah, the owners, they are there in attendance as well. But we feel, though, the application has met the requirements, the important requirements, especially from an ecological perspective, from the work that we've done since the public meeting. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other comments? You know, I look at this application and, you know, the one picture, I think I counted over 30 docks around this EPW. I mean, it's like so many other, this township is an interesting combo, and that we're doing our best to maintain it in as environmentally clean state as possible. And yet we know the development has taken place for, well, probably the last 150 years, often in many places where now we wouldn't have allowed it. But this lot exists. And if I remember correctly, that North Dock has been in existence for longer than the current owners have owned it, like decades. Like it showed up in pictures from, I forget how long ago. So I'm not as concerned. I think that what I do appreciate that the owners have done, as we've had in numerous other applications, got a whole pile of studies done on their property that were never done before with regards to the environment, and therefore got professional advice on how to minimize their impact, given that they have a home on a property that we may not have approved it if it was never developed. And that's just history. And I think we have to recognize history. And I respect the fact that the current owners, like other applicants we've had before us and on other cases, have willingly gone and did all the studies and everything else and respected the recommendations. And I applaud that, and I think that's a good thing. And so therefore, under the circumstances, I don't have great concern with this application. And because, well, it's a combination of history and you can only do, if we wanted to go to the extreme, we tell people you got to tear everything down and donate it to the land trust and be done. That's not practical. So with that, if I don't see any more hands being raised, I'm going to read the motion. You certainly could. So the motion is moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Bocek. Be it resolved that Council enacts bylaw 2026-053, being a bylaw to adopt official plan amendment number 30-026-01, to further amend the Township of Georgian Bay's official plan by adding site-specific policy D.1.4.5.1 to permit 2 docks in a provincially significant wetland on the lands municipally known as 146 Prisque Road. And that bylaw 2026-053 adopting official plan number 30, official plan amendment number 30 be forwarded to the District of Muskoka for approval. And the Council enacts bylaw 2026-054 being a zoning bylaw amendment Z26-04 to further amend zoning bylaw 2014-75 by rezoning the property municipally known as 146 Prisque Road from the Shoreline Residential Type 1 or SR1 zone to a Shoreline Residential Type 1 exception, SR1-87 zone, and to rezone a portion of lands appurtenant to 146 Prisque Road from an Environmental Protection Provincially Significant Wetland or EPPSW zone to an Environmental Protection Provincially Significant Wetland Exception 3 or EP-PSW-3 zone. All those in favor, and could you please record the vote? Sorry. Okay.
Through the mayor, it looks like the recommendation does need to be revised. It should say Shoreline Residential Island Type 1 in brackets SRI1 to a shoreline residential island type 1 exception SRI1-XX.
That's
Yeah.
our I-1-87. Okay, well done, Counselor Hazelton. With that, I'm not going to reread the whole thing, and I'm going to ask our clerk to take the vote, please.
Let the record show that Counselor Cooper has requested a recorded vote. I will now call each member's name. Please indicate whether you are in favor or opposed. Counselor Cooper,
No.
Counselor Brian Bocheck,
Yes. And on yes.
Counselor Predko,
Yes.
Counselor Jarvis,
Yes.
Counselor Graziano,
Can you come back to me? I'm just reviewing something very quickly. Thank you.
Counselor Hazelton,
Yes.
Counselor Graziano,
I mean, yes. Yes, thank you.
Mayor Kutsier.
Yes.
Let the record show, motion carries 6-1.
All right, thank you very much. You're done. Now you have to get to work and follow all the rules. All right. Now we have official plan amendment 026-05 and zoning bylaw amendment Z26-10 for 34 Curling Club Road. Ms. McCabe, I think it's your turn.
Sorry, I thought it was on. I apologize. Access is provided directly from Curling Club Road, classified as a township road. Presently, the subject site contains a commercial building that is 625 square meters in floor area. The remainder of the site is generally clear with a mix of paved and gravel surfaces and contains 26 surface parking spaces and outdoor storage area. The subject site is located within the built-up area of MacTier, which is comprised of a mix of highway, commercial, service, and residential uses. Adjacent properties along Curling Club Road include similar commercial and service operations, reflecting the area's function as a local business node within the township of Georgian Bay. An official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment were submitted to the township and deemed complete in April of this year. A public meeting was held on June 2nd with no concerns expressed by council or agencies that were circulated with the applications. The property is currently designated as residential on Schedule C of the Township of Georgian Bay official plan, being the MacTier land use designations, and the intent is to amend the designation to the commercial designation. The commercial operation being undertaken on the property provides a full-service boat lift service, as well as additional marine sales and service options. The current use of the building includes the contractor's service and warehouse building, ancillary office space, and outdoor storage. The applicant's business continues to expand, necessitating additional building area to support the desired services and operations, including marine vessel storage within a portion of the new building addition. The proposed development would expand the existing 625 square meter building by constructing a 975 square meter building addition to a total of 1,600 square meters in floor area, as shown in the preliminary site plan. An addition to the rear of the existing building is being proposed, and the addition is designed to be integrated coherently with the existing building. The existing use of the building will continue in the addition and include an area for assembly, a small office, and storage. A total of 26 parking spaces are provided, 3 of which are barrier-free, located on the north and south portions of the site. A second loading space is located in front of the overhead bay door of the proposed addition. Vehicular site access is provided by Curling Club Road, ensuring efficient ingress and egress. Emergency access and circulation are accommodated within the site as per municipal requirements. The proposed a plan amendment, as I stated before, is to redesignate the property on Schedule C of the official plan from residential to commercial. Section E4211 states that the predominant use of land in the commercial designation shall be for commerce and shall include such uses as retail sales or service establishments, marinas, automotive or marine sales or service establishments, business or professional offices. The building addition would be permitted under the urban center and commercial land use designations. The proposed expansion to the existing building conforms with commercial development policies as the existing and expanded business serves the designated urban center area and the service area itself. I apologize. In addition to the rear of the existing building is being proposed, that addition is designed to be integrated coherently with the existing building. As stated prior, the total of 26 parking spaces are provided, some are barrier-free. Section E4227 and E4228 of the zoning bylaw provide policy direction on visibility, landscaping, and outdoor storage. The site plan submitted in support of the application has been designed to maintain a high-quality visual appearance from adjacent transportation routes, particularly Lake Joseph Road, which abuts the rear portion of the site. Landscaping along the rear yard property line is planned and will be further refined through the site plan approval process and subsequent site plan agreement. Overall, the building expansion represents a commercial use that is recognized in the official plan as an important part of creating and maintaining a diverse economy. The subject site is currently zoned as industrial exception 9. The industrial zone is intended to accommodate industrial uses such as heavy equipment sales and service, light manufacturing, maintenance, and garage. In 2018, bylaw 2018-29 amended the zoning bylaw to permit the additional use of staff accommodations on the property. The existing and proposed use is not in line with the intent of the industrial zone, and as such, the applicant is requesting the subject site be rezoned to marine commercial type 3 exception with site-specific provisions to permit the proposed development. The proposed 26 parking spaces, 23 regular and 3 accessible, more appropriately reflects the functional need of the site, accommodates employees and occasional visitors. Site plan control, as you all know, is a tool under Section 41 of the Planning Act, which enables a municipality to exercise site-specific controls over development. The owner will be required to submit and obtain a site plan approval and enter into an agreement with the township to ensure that the site plan and landscaping plan are followed and completed as presented. Once the site plan agreement has been registered on title and the site plan has been approved, the owner will be required to submit for a zoning certificate and prior to the issuance of a building permit. Planning staff have conducted an analysis of the applicable planning legislation and are recommending approval of the applications, including the adoption of an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Council, your turn for questions, comments, or whatever. Me. Councillor Jarvis.
Oh, interestingly enough, my mic was already on. That's why I didn't say anything that shouldn't have been recorded. In your comments, Deb, you said that the property is currently listed as industrial and we're changing it to commercial. I show it on the maps as residential.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's actually residential in the official plan. It's shown as a residential, but in the zoning bylaw, it's shown as industrial.
No.
And it should not be that way.
Thank you for clearing that up. I'd hate to have a, yeah, okay.
I don't know how that happened.
Thank you. Okay, and I guess when we go through our OP, this is just an observation generally to that area of land. Maybe we should be looking at the rest of that residential section and considering rezoning it for commercial. But anyway, thank you.
I agree 100% with that statement.
Oh, that was a big argument. Okay, any other comments or questions? Well, I'll read the motion while you consider whether you have any more to say. Moved by Councillor Graziano, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved, the council enacts bylaw 2026-055, being a bylaw to adopt official plan amendment number 31-026-05, to further amend the Township of Georgian Bay's official plan by amending Schedule C of the official plan to redesignate the lands known as 34 Curling Club Road from residential to commercial. And that bylaw 2026-055, adopting official plan amendment number 31, be forwarded to the District of Muskoka for approval. And the council enact bylaw 2026-56, being a zoning bylaw amendment Z26-10, to further amend zoning bylaw 2014-75 by rezoning the property municipally known as 34 Curling Club Road from the industrial exception 9 zone to a marine commercial type 3 exception zone, CM3-1. And that the owner apply for and obtain site plan approval from the Township of Georgian Bay, including, if required, the execution and registration of a site plan agreement against the title of the lands. Any further comments or questions? All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. All right, our next item is temporary use zoning bylaw amendment extension application Z2605 for rock crushing by OBD. And as you know, this was, we cannot discuss this because all 7 of us have made a declaration of conflict of interest and or pecuniary interest due to the fact that all 7 of us are subject to a lawsuit where we've been identified individually by OBD developments, and therefore we feel that we need judicial review and in that and I can't speak for each one of you individually what you are looking for, but all of us have recognized that conflict, and therefore we will not be discussing this file any further today. And now, with that, that's the end of our staff reports. Sorry, planning application staff reports. Now we're just going to go straight staff reports. And Mr. Crack, no, hang on. Yes, Mr. Cracky, we're going back to you for the outline for the 2026-28 Georgian Bay official plan review and Bill 98 new framework update. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With your permission, I will share my screen. So as the mayor's already announced, I'm here to present once again an outline for our official plan review, given Bill 98's new planning framework. In March, council approved what planning staff believed at the time would be a combined OPA and zoning bylaw review and update for both documents. It was based on multiple amendments, based upon topics, and based on a lot of community and partners' input. And then, unbeknownst to planning staff, the province had other ideas. And in March, later, just 3 weeks after you approved that outline for the official plan and zoning bylaw review and update, they introduced Bill 98, which has since been proclaimed and is in effect and is in the Planning Act. And Bill 98 requires what's called a new official plan framework. And that new official plan framework includes chapters, sections, and schedules of an official plan in great detail, and land use designations, all of which we need to fit our policies into. Originally, when we paused our official plan review and update, we'd hoped that we were going to be able to do a great deal more housekeeping than we are actually doing in the interim. But that being said, I think we're addressing 2 very important items through housekeeping, and one is accessory residential units and source water protection. And those housekeeping amendments are going forward to you separately, and you will be considering those before we begin the new official plan review. You've seen this before. It's in your property tax newsletter. We're hoping today to encourage everyone to speak to as many people as they can to sign up online to subscribe online. Sorry, I used the wrong word. To subscribe on our website to the planning notices so that they do receive notices. We, of course, do not have a newspaper of sufficient circulation in our entire township to rely upon. So we are going to be relying upon digital notification to residents, community groups, etc. And while we have all the community groups' email addresses, we don't have every residence. So again, as you're seeing people over the summer, please encourage them to either scan the QR code that's in their property tax notice or visit the webpage and subscribe. For this new outline, we are preserving the terms of reference that Council asked for in 2018. And those terms of reference are to actively consult and engage the community, partners, and stakeholders. 2, produce an official plan and zoning bylaw that conform to all applicable legislation, policies, and regulations, are aligned with each other. You've just seen an application where they weren't aligned. And we want to make sure that doesn't happen again. And are user-friendly. And that's probably going to be one of our greatest challenges because, of course, we do have a lot of very complex concepts that we're trying to put forward. And 3, in our terms of reference, we want to identify to you the timelines and budgets, including any requests for proposal from consultants to lead and or study an outlined topic in a future project plan for council approval before starting that topic. So there may be additional reports outside of the strictly planning process that come to you with proposals as necessary. This time around, our outline is strictly for the official plan. With Bill 98's requirement for a new planning framework, staff do not believe that we can provide that new official plan because it will be a new official plan from the ground up. We can't do a zoning bylaw review and update at the same time. We need to find out what's in the official plan before we do that zoning bylaw. So we're going to start, if you approve today, with a public meeting on August 26th. And normally that public meeting in the case of a new official plan would strictly be to encourage the public to comment on what we've provided so far to council from an outline perspective, but also to give their thoughts, aspirations, goals, desires, dreams, concerns to you and to us so that we could hear them. But in this case, the district staff have agreed that given Bill 98's new planning framework, that I will also provide both council and the public before we start that public meeting with a presentation to explain our understanding as staff of Bill 98's changes to the Planning Act, and perhaps give some initial thoughts as to how where we are now moves to where we need to be in that new framework. But it will be a very high-level discussion, and it will not, by any stretch of the imagination, be a draft official plan in any shape or form. And then we're going to move to a process that was reflected in the last outline, where we discuss topics. However, in this case, we're not going to move out of that process with the topics until all the topics are fully discussed. And so the key difference is that these topical discussions, public open houses, working group meetings, etc., will happen likely during 2027, potentially into early 2028. However, my real hope is that the bulk of these take place in 2027, and that what will come out of that is the formal approval process. And so once staff receive that input through multiple iterations of these processes, we will draft an official plan, and we will discuss it with district staff for approximately 3 months before we bring it to the public and to council for consideration. And then finally, hopefully adoption by council sometime late in 2028, just prior to, but perhaps potentially just after the January 1st deadline for the new planning framework in 2029. For now, we only have preliminary topics, and these are not a part of your resolutions today, but I wanted to make them known to you. And certainly I'm interested in your thoughts in regards to these. One is Indigenous engagement, and this is required by Bill 98. The other are the new designations and schedules to the official plan, policies for the new designations, MOP, community plan, and site and area policies, which for now we don't have answers to. And this is one where we are going to have to pivot as we move forward. The province has written some things on the environmental registry, but they have not written a decision. And it is likely that their decision will be implemented by regulation as opposed to amendments to the Planning Act, given that that's the way Bill 98 has set up the Planning Act. But we don't have answers to those questions. So we're entering this not fully understanding, other than we will need to conform to the MOP, how that conformity will take place, and not fully understanding how our community plans will fit, or our area or site-specific special policy areas will fit into the official plan. Topic number 5 is water access levels, including climate change resilience, navigation, and marinas, which is already under discussion with the planning working group. Number 6 is employment, commercial, and resorts. Number 7 is housing in settlement areas, as opposed to housing in the rural or the shoreline areas. Number 8 is the Port Severn Village Center, which we discussed earlier today. Number 9 is the McTier, and maybe this one has to grow already today, hearing, of course, that it shares some of Port Severn's unique circumstances with misalignment of designations and zones. But we were already aware that there was a boundary issue in McTier, and so that topic may be already evolving. Number 10 is recreational water quality. And number 11 are big picture shoreline accessory use, building, and structure policies. Today you received an application which is testing the limits of what we as a municipality have thought of in terms of what should be on the shoreline. The question is that a good idea? Do we need some policies? Right now, generally speaking, in the municipality, there aren't policies. There are zoning regulations, but not policies in this respect. And so we want to look at this from a high level perspective, from a policy perspective. So again, as I'd already mentioned, that formal review process would start in 2028. And just to re-summarize, the first 3 months of that formal process would be staff at both the local and district level trying to prepare an actual draft official plan for council to review, followed by public open houses and meetings, likely over 4 months, and then district review over 6 months. So I am asking for 4 resolutions today. The first is, be it resolved that council accepts the July 2026 outline for the 2026 official plan review and Bill 98 update, including a public meeting at 9 a.m. on Wednesday, August 26th, 2026. I'm sorry, I'm not sure why there was a duplicate slide there. I apologize. The second resolution is, be it resolved that council confirms its terms of reference for the 2026-28 official plan review and Bill 98 update and future review and update of the zoning bylaw are to, 1, actively consult and engage the community, partners, and stakeholders. 2, produce an official plan and zoning bylaw that A, conforms to all applicable legislation, policies, and regulations, B, are aligned with each other, and C, are user-friendly. And 3, identify in future reports as necessary the timelines and budgets, including any requests for proposal from consultants to lead and or study a topic in the outline. And then the last 2 recommendations are, be it resolved that council authorizes the Director of Planning to set the membership of the working groups for the 2026-28 official plan review and Bill 98 update, drawing firstly from the planning working group and adding members as needed to achieve appropriate representation from the community, partners, and stakeholders. And lastly, be it resolved that planning staff are authorized to prepare future reports as necessary regarding any requests for proposal of consulting services and/or budgets for the 2026-28 official plan review and Bill 98 update. Thank you, and I'm available for your questions.
Thank you very much. Council. The last thing that Mr. Kratky did was read our motion in 4 parts. Any questions, comments, discussion at this time? Councillor Bocek.
Thank you. I'm not too familiar.
Oh, sorry. Bill 98 has not had its final reading and it's still in the works. So this would not be amendments to Bill 98.
No, Bill 98 did have its third and final reading.
Okay.
And then the very day that we last met, the Parliament ended early and royal proclamation took place moments before Parliament ended that day. So we were literally here in this room.
Nice.
And I was telling you that they had another, I think it was until September at some point that they would be dealing with these types of issues. And literally while I was telling you that, they did it all.
Thank you. And secondly, this is going to be a very time-oriented project, and term of council ends in November. This certainly isn't going to be finished by the end of November. So this is going to be a complete new education to the new council of the day. My last question is, in your list, number 8, it said the village of Port Severn. I'm not sure where we got promoted to the village of Port Severn, because 30 years that I've been in Port Severn, almost 40, it was a hamlet. It was a hamlet, not a village. And we had the village of Mactier and the hamlet of Port Severn. Can you correct me if I'm wrong, or when that changed?
Sure, it's not. So again, the Port Severn Urban Center is an urban center located within the township of Georgian Bay and the district of Muskoka. Within the Port Severn Urban Center, this council saw fit back the last time it did its official plan in 2014 to include the Port Severn Master Plan and Urban Design Guidelines as a part of the policies of the official plan that development is to be consistent with. And the Port Severn Master Plan and Urban Design Guidelines makes an area, again, from approximately these buildings here to the lock, and from the opposite side of 400, underneath 400, again, all the way to the lock, into what's called the village center. They could have called it the downtown, but they didn't. They decided they called it the village center. And it speaks to what one would normally anticipate you would find in a community of this size. And I think it goes back to, when you read the document, what was on Island K before this very large fire approximately a century ago that cleared those lands. And it's really about reflecting what's on the opposite side of the locks on this side of the locks, where most of the population in the urban center resides. And so it's something that doesn't yet exist. Whether this council decides that it's better to call it the downtown, the core, whatever, we can definitely talk about that through the official plan review and update. I think one of the big problems is, just like with the waterfront community plans, the Bill 98 would not recognize the way we're currently doing that planning. And how that planning will be done is left for this current ERO, environmental registry discussion, to be finished by the province. And as of now, we have no idea when the province will finish that discussion but we do have a deadline for the new planning framework, which is January 1st, 2029. So I'm saying, let's start doing the work, appreciating that some of these things are still a little fuzzy, and we're going to have to adjust our approach as we go forward.
That's great for the second part of my answer. The first part being a hamlet. Port Severn consists of 3 townships: Tay Township, Severn Township, and Georgian Bay Township. Collectively, the 3 would probably reach the criteria of being a village because we all use Port Severn. In the 3 townships, it is our hub. But the Port Severn portion of Port Severn only starts at Lock 45, goes down past the community center, the end of Long Pine Road. I consider it a hamlet still, but in here we call it a village because I think the general population of Port Severn reaches that threshold. And that's what my thoughts are on it. We're using 3 separate townships to create the village.
And again, if that name is something the council wants to stick with, we can. If they prefer a different name, we can definitely, look at a different name. I think the key difference is that it's been a century since there was really a village center on this side of the lock for Port Severn. And I think council's intent since 2009 and reaffirmed in 2014 was to ensure that this side of the lock has a mixed use area, which includes retail, office, services, and residential development at an appropriate scale, which is again in that 2 to 3 story range, that's street oriented, but also recognizes the importance of the water to this community. And I think that is well spoken in that document. The challenge we're going to have is how do we update it and bring it into the Bill 98 planning framework.
Okay, thank you for that. And I think that explains why the village. Appreciate it.
If you could turn your mic off, then I will just say, I'm still gonna call it Port Severn regardless of whether you think it's a village or a hamlet or a city. It doesn't matter. Who do I have
Mr.
next?
Mayor, it takes a village to become a village.
Oh, well, there you go. But with that, I'm gonna go to Councillor Jarvis, please.
Thank you. And I just want to clarify that this is, Port Severn is referred to as village, it's the Port Severn Village Center. It's not the village of Port Severn. So words carry meaning and where they are in a sentence also carries meaning. So we've got to be careful about that. But just my observation to add to that. My question to the planning department is Bill 98 hasn't been fully fleshed out yet, correct? I mean, we're working with a moving target, are we not?
No, so Bill 98 is fully flushed out, and the province may or may not provide additional directions, especially with respect to the relationship between local official plans and the district's official plan, and with respect to community plans, secondary plans, and site-specific and special policy areas. The province wrote that they heard a lot of comments. So if you use the link in my report to go to the environmental registry, you can read that the province has heard that these are needed. They haven't closed that discussion, but they haven't left it open either. So you can't comment, I can't comment, but they also haven't closed the discussion. One would hope sooner rather than later, given how important this is, that they will come forward with what they intend to do in that respect. Because we actually have a year longer than many municipalities. There are major municipalities in this province that have to be ready for the new planning framework on January 1st, 2028. I'm glad we have until January 1st, 2029. But no, whatever the province decides in that regard, we will need to follow, and we will need to find a way to make our approach to planning for our township work within that framework. And again, so rather than looking at this as an obstacle, I think what I'd like to do is hope that we can begin to look at this as how do we do exactly what we've always wanted to do, in our township, but in this new framework. And I will say, one of the very, very positive things of this new framework is it finally requires us to actually put into policy how we are going to work together with the First Nations.
Thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for that report. Jeff, I have 3 points I wanted to cover off. First of all, just to gain a little bit better understanding of the term policies, which you used earlier on in your report. And I'm guessing that what you're referring to is that those policies that may be missing would be inside the OP, is that correct?
So both every existing policy within our OP, as well as all of the topics that we had identified for the review and evaluation prior to Bill 98 now need to be discussed, because our existing official plan will not meet the framework. So we will need to bring into this new planning framework new policies that still achieve the same objectives and goals and ends as the existing policies. And so, for example, the second last meeting, I believe, I brought forward this notion of, you know, what does the waterfront designation become? And it seems to me that there are likely 3 land use designations in the Bill 98 framework that will cover off the waterfront designation. But then we need to then adjust the policies that we currently have under one designation into those 3 designations appropriate to those land uses. So there will be new policies, but hopefully, again, the purpose and effect of those policies, my goal would be that we keep them where they are important, that we refine them where they're confusing and unclear, and that we address inconsistencies with upper tier documents like the Muskoka official plan, like the PPS, where it's necessary.
Okay, so thank you for that. And I just wanted to also clarify, it's not so much a clarification as you're talking about with policies, but it's often been said that it's not a bad idea to have verbiage in your official plan that marries with and terms, not just verbiage, but terms and data and criteria in the official plan that match with the zoning bylaws. It becomes more powerful. Is that something that would be part of this objective as well?
Absolutely. And I'm a big fan of not having definitions for the sake of having definitions. I think that where the PPS provides a definition, although we may not agree with it, it's provided. And why we would begin to try and define something differently. But the PPS is only the top level document.
Right.
And the MOP has adopted the PPS definitions. But in our case, there are some things that are more detailed at the level at which we are planning, where we may require additional definitions. But what I will say is it's always important to keep plans clear, concise, and straightforward. And that's really what the province is asking us. They're saying, and again, I don't think ours is the one that they were after. They were looking at in some large municipalities and saying, hey, unless you have a PhD, you can't understand what this document says. But I think what they're essentially asking us to do is be very clear, very transparent, even down to the fact where we have textually defined 2 of our primary designations, the waterfront designation and the rural designation. That I don't think is permitted by the new planning framework. We are going to have to map these so that someone can look on a map and say, okay, that's shoreline, sorry, and that's rural. And I think that as long as we appreciate that, we can begin the work and start to move in that direction.
Okay, but that's, and I appreciate all that. And I think you've also agreed that we can do some things that whereby we have essentially belt and braces in both the OP and zoning bylaws. Is that correct?
I'm a firm believer as well that yes, they should align, and that's one of the terms of reference. So we shouldn't be having policies that do not find their way into zoning requirements, but we also shouldn't be having zoning requirements that don't have policy support.
Perfect. Thank you. So two other points. One is, you had a list of sort of priorities that you gave. I think there were, I don't know, a dozen of them. And I just thought it might make sense for the order to be in alignment with our strategic plan, which is the environment is first. So there's some pieces in there that were environmentally addressed, but they were somewhere in amongst that. And I'm going to suggest that maybe from an order perspective, just to keep reinforcing what we've said at our strat plan, which is environment number one. So I'm encouraging you to give some thought to that in terms of how we order those things. It's not to say those other things aren't important, but let's be consistent in terms of the way we order things.
So I'm happy to reorder it. That is just a preliminary list at this point. That's sort of council's pre-look at what was going to be brought to you at the public meeting. What I will say is I was trying to highlight with that approach some of the matters that are required by Bill 98. And because your strategic plan was thought of, I believe 4 years ago now, obviously it didn't contemplate Bill 98 either. And so I do appreciate how important the environment is, but I think one of the key aspects of Bill 98 are those new framework matters, and that's why I've put those at the top. So I'm happy to elevate the environment, but I think it's also important to keep those new, never before discussed items front and center, because they're going to take a lot of work over the next year.
Another, actually, I've got two more, sorry. One is,
that's the third time you said you have two more. So I think
I
think there's some reproduction going on.
I said I had three and now I have four. I've only gone through two of them, but anyway, but thanks for counting. Just in terms of having the ability to do certain things with these tools. I think it's important that we do a little more research. Maybe you've done some, but I'm going to encourage more of it, whereby we can consult with legal brainiacs, so to speak, that could tell us how we can work with, how we can work around, and make sure that we have a made-in Township of Georgian Bay official plan and zoning bylaws, et cetera, as opposed to constantly being driven by provincial guidelines. I realize that they're an upper tier. I get that. But on the other hand, there may be some opportunities for us if we find them. So I'm just going to encourage that as well, if that's okay. And finally, there's some commentary about our director, Whitlibb, adding to the working group. And I say, great, let's do that. I've been certainly involved with it and others have. And my only suggestion is that we be very mindful that if it's a member of the working group, in other words, a voting member, that it be somebody that does not have a conflict of interest. In other words, voting in favor of sort of a recommendation, and it happens to enhance the amount of money in their genes, I suggest we've got a conflict. So we need to make sure that we consult with expertise, maybe in the construction business or whatever, real estate business, but that we are careful about the conflict aspect of that. Is there anything, do you agree or not?
Through the mayor to Councillor Cooper and to council, certainly I agree, and the wording that Mr. Kratky shared about authorizing me as a director to expand on the working group is consistent with council's original motion for the establishment of the working groups at the discretion of the director. So certainly going to build upon that expertise, those local experts that we have.
for their knowledge, but also ensure that we have a cross-section of the community. And mindful of that issue that Councillor Cooper raised, to ensure that there isn't, there aren't competing interests, but sometimes, if we're going to, for example, devise a major policy document and a zoning bylaw, all of which are intended to regulate development, then that cross-section of expertise must have representation from that development community, or else we're not going to get a cross-section of views. We can weigh those views, but so it's a balance. But because, again, this is a working group and not a planning advisory committee, and the one reason for the establishment of the working group was to avoid that conflict of interest issue. So we can mine that knowledge that is in our community.
Just a bit of a clarification there, and I very much think that the working group hopefully will consult with that knowledge base that you're referring to. Just that they wouldn't be voting on what would be brought forward, but rather giving input and they're providing their expertise. That's what I'm encouraging here. Thank you.
Yeah, we hope that knowledge base becomes members of our working groups.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelton.
Thank you for that detailed report. Lots to consider. I just wanted to highlight one area under your analysis and options section, just before that lovely chart. You talk about items 1, 2, and 3. Number 2 being produce an OP and zoning bylaw that conform and are aligned with each other and user friendly. One of the, and I'm not suggesting that you haven't included it, but sometimes being explicit might be helpful. But we have a lot of neighborhood plans in our community, and there's a lot of people with huge emotion about the current state of their neighborhood plans and the amount of work that has gone into them. And I'm wondering if just as we communicate what is going on here, if there is a way to elevate the understanding that they exist. There may be a new framework that we have to work under, but there will be a strategy to try to pull in and embed in the new official plan as much as possible the characteristics of the neighborhood plans that exist today. Is there, I mean, that wording isn't there. I just picked up on it, but and maybe it's there from your perspective, but I didn't read it. And I'm just thinking that other people who read this kind of information just want that kind of elevated assurance. That's all I'm asking.
So I think candidly, those are part of that environmental registry that is still open, but not open, where the province is not accepting more comments, but where they've written that they've heard that they need to give further thought to those matters. And I very much hope, and I check at least on a weekly basis, that they're either going to reopen that registry or open a new one to further discuss it, or make a decision, because that is the ultimate question that is still out there for Bill 98's new planning framework. And that is, how do community plans fit into the framework? What the province wrote on the environmental registry was that they believe it's back to the future. They're thinking of the 1983 Planning Act and how community plans were separate documents within the Planning Act called secondary plans. But a secondary plan was still a document that you could apply to amend. So you could come to council and say, I want to amend my secondary plan designation or policies or whatever else. But the province hasn't, they've spelled out their preliminary thoughts after what they've heard. They haven't given us any final decision. So all of us are very much anxiously awaiting that.
Thank you for that. And I did see the environmental registry link there. I've spent a lot of time on the environmental registry for purely environmental matters, nothing to do with neighborhood plans, community plans, etc. So if I was confused by that, I'll be pretty certain that others are going to be confused by that. And I'm just asking if there's a way that we can find some words to plug in to your report that will help the immediate understanding that we are hyper-focused on on pulling forward as much as possible the contents of these neighborhood plans.
I'm wondering if I may, because item 1 says actively consult and engage the community partners and stakeholders, if we might just add including community plans, something like that.
Sure.
So again, my reason for not being so explicit at this point is we really don't know the province's decision. So if the province were to not issue any regulations that allow for community plans, then at this point in time, no, on January 1st, 2029, without the use of whatever they're going to call them, community plans, secondary plans, we would need to, as staff, see what can be included in a designation that would be a single designation in all areas in our municipality. Because again, what the Bill 98 framework is requiring is that a shoreline designation be the same on all the waters in a municipality. So no, I'm very hopeful that what the province wrote in the environmental registry and that they heard from not just this municipality, but many, those concerns. My hope is that we are going to see something fairly quickly, I'm guessing in October or November or December, that gives us much more information. And I guess what I'm saying is we've got a lot of ground to cover on other things which we've never discussed before. And maybe until we get that final decision from the province on these very important matters, maybe it's best for us to focus our efforts on things that are not strictly related to those. Because again, what the province wrote is they heard the concern. And I think that's good. They heard that there are community plans in every municipality in this province, and that those communities within those municipalities don't want their individual plans to simply disappear. So I'm very hopeful that we're going to see something. I don't think they would have written what they've written on the environmental registry unless something was going to come. But the problem is we don't know what that is.
Leave it there.
All right, I mean, I think even if we don't change the motion, I think that you're hearing very clearly that we need to refer to the community plans that already are in our official plan. And obviously in our zoning bylaws, and that's a vitally important source of information as we go forward. And I don't think I have to tell you that. Director Whitlip.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think it's fair to say that we will maintain and continue to elevate and promote those policy objectives of those individual respective community plans through this process until or if we're told to stop. So that's the starting point, is we have community plans. The province has given us this round hole in which we're to insert a round peg that is the new official plan. We have a bit of a star-shaped peg, and we're going to find every way that we can to make that star-shaped peg fit.
And you're not, I suspect from the future council, whoever they may be, you're not going to get instructions to stop, but to utilize the knowledge, the restrictions, the policies, the approach as much as possible in what you're going to create going forward. But that's, I don't want to get ahead of us, and I don't want to get into an even further lengthy thing. I just want to make that point.
Maybe I can just add one statement, and that is that what staff came to you with in March is true. As planners, we believe that this official plan that you have today was a good document.
Mm-hmm.
It does a lot of good things for the communities and all of the residents of this township. What we're coming to you today with is that hasn't changed. So what's in the document is still a lot of good information. What we don't know is how we're going to put that information into the new document. And until we know with greater certainty what community plans are going to be called, I'm hesitant to call them community plans because we might have to call them secondary.
Well, that's fair enough, but yeah, we know we have to translate what we do into, I'll call it Bill 98 E's. And whatever bills come, and I don't doubt, talking about moving targets, I don't doubt that there'll be more bills in the next year or two that are going to be, dare I say, challenging because we've gone through a series of them. But I think, at this point, we should just get, is that a new hand? Okay, Councillor Hazelton, let's.
When you last communicated to us or previously communicated to us about the desire to not create a new official plan, but in fact to amend it, my memories are that there were characteristics of a new official plan that did things like grandfathering and other things, and I'm not sure I have the right terminology here, but there was very conscious reasons that you came to us as to why you were not going to create a new official plan, throw the old one out. And now I am wanting to revisit that concern that you presented before and try to help us understand better if we're going to have a new plan, what were the risks that you were trying to avoid, and what else do we need to do collectively to ensure that we don't go down those risk areas?
Through the mayor, to Councillor Hazelton and the rest of council. Yeah, and certainly Bill 98 changed that strategy entirely. Councillor Hazelton is correct. It was our intent to do a series of amendments to the existing official plan. And that had a number of advantages. One that was a product of, as Jeff has indicated, it's a good official plan. And it just needed a bit of tune-up based on having been driven on the road for the last 14 years. And the other thing that strategy would have achieved is that any one of those individual amendments, if appealed or challenged by somebody or a body, would not have upended the rest of the process. The rest of the official plan would have been preserved. Now we have no choice. We do have to replace our official plan with a new Bill 98 style official plan. So that advantage, that not divide and conquer, but separate and insulate approach to preserving the integrity of the official plan, that opportunity is no longer before us.
All right, well, thank you very much. I have moved by Councillor Cooper, second by Councillor Jarvis. Be it resolved that council accepts the July 2026 outline for the 2026-28 official plan review and Bill 98 update, including a public meeting at 9 a.m. on Wednesday, August 26, 2026, and that council reconfirms its terms of reference for the 2026-28 official plan review and Bill 98 update and future review and update of the zoning bylaw are to: 1, actively consult and engage the community, partners and stakeholders; 2, produce an official plan and zoning bylaw that A, conforms to all applicable legislation, policies, and regulations; B, are aligned with each other; and C, are user-friendly; and 3, identify in future reports as necessary the timelines and budgets, including any requests for proposals from consultants to lead and or study topics in the outline. And that council authorizes the director of planning to set the membership of working groups for the 2026-28 official plan review and Bill 98 update, drawing firstly from the planning working group and adding members as needed to achieve appropriate representation from the community, partners, and stakeholders. And that the planning staff are authorized to prepare future reports as necessary regarding any requests for proposal of consulting services and or budgets for the 2026-28 official plan review and Bill 98 update. Is that you got a comment for it?
Sure.
Councillor Bocek.
Just what was not covered in the statements just made. Director Whiblett, can you tell me the hours that are going to be spent and the budget that is going to be needed in order to complete this project? Because this is not an overnight.
And to the nearest penny, please.
Yes.
So the direct answer to your question, Councillor Bocek, through the mayor, is no and no. But what I can tell you is that the majority of work is going to be staff time. It's going to be in-house. There's currently a budget amount allocated, and it's been on the books for a while for the official plan update of $200,000, I believe. That will be, we do expect to be able to stay within that budget, but there will be situations where we may need outside expertise. So, for example, a topic area, and some members of council here who are part of the working group know, we've talked a great deal a bit about coastal hazard issues. That's a body of knowledge and an expertise where we may have to get some coastal engineering experts involved to help us devise policies or come up with the right elevation and unit of elevation of water level measurement, etc. So at a cost.
Okay.
It's the best answer I can give you at this point.
No, no.
All right. And I'm expecting to know from, do you need me to read the thing again? Oh, Councillor Cooper.
So essentially, you'd call those requests outhouse ones versus in-house? Thank you.
No and no. Okay. All those in favor? All right. And because I got all those votes, I guess I don't have to read it again. Moved by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Bocek. Be it resolved that the Planning Council adopt bylaw 2026-057 to confirm the proceedings of the July 14th, 2026 council meeting. All those in favor? And that is carried. And finally, moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Prisque. Be it resolved, the Planning Council does now adjourn at 12:01 p.m. until August 11th, 2026 at 9 a.m. or at the call of the chair. All those in favor? And we are adjourned. Thank you very much.